it, but I wrote this one today because I've been to this event a few times and I've seen the amazing women who are honored with the awards and the courage that they have to overcome some incredible obstacles. And I was inspired by everyone here to share a bit of my actual story of what got me from, A to Z. So there may be times when I look back at my notes because I'm super nervous. I haven't shared any of this stuff really publicly before, and so I'm just so honored to be here with you, so I wanted to share and have the courage that you all have. So I began my life as sort of this mini social worker. I was that kid who would be out on the playground and trying to solve everybody's problems and see why this kid's not getting along with this kid, and do my best to really help out even like complete strangers, which my parents eventually start saying, you maybe don't go up to strangers at the store and ask them why they look sad. Let's stop that part. So I was that precocious kid, and but we moved around a lot. My dad had a job working for the government as an air traffic controller, and that's known for extreme stress, and we moved about every 6 months when I was a kid. So we never really had other people in our lives who were supporting us, who were looking out for us or knew my brother and I at all, because we moved all the time. And we always were moving into a real nice neighborhood, and people kind of feel like if you're in this neighborhood, then your life's probably fine, right? So we were living in nice neighborhoods, and behind closed doors, we were really struggling. My father, he had extreme mood swings, and I don't know if that's caused by the stress of having been an air traffic controller, or alcoholism, or like bipolar, or what it was. But what I knew as a little girl, it was that I couldn't predict how my dad was going to respond to things. There might be one time when I do something and he's super happy and he's congratulating me and telling me what a great kid I am, and the very next day I could do almost the same thing, and he would act out with rage and very, very violent reaction to it. And so I think that unpredictability was really scary for me. And what that did to my brother was he really emulated that. So it was just the two of us, and my mom, of course, she worked a lot, but and my dad would be very violent. My brother then took that up too, and I became very opposite of that. I became this like the social worker person and empathetic and trying to change the world in that way. And my brother grew up to be, he's an abusive alcoholic. He's been arrested several times, and all of his 7 wives have ended up in the hospital at one point or another. So we're sort of that textbook family where we went very different directions with our lives. And then in 2000, sorry. So with the stuff with my brother, when he became violent, he beat me so badly that I was hospitalized 3 times before high school, so junior high and elementary school. So in my early career, I knew I wanted to do social work. I knew I wanted to do something that would make a difference in the lives of children who were living in a situation like that. And both those little kids who are acting out with rage and they don't know where to put that, they don't know what's going on in their lives, and the little kids who are trying to fix the world, that little girl who is out there somewhere who thinks that maybe if she makes everything perfect, then everybody's going to be okay. So I really wanted to dive into something that did both of those. So I started out as a youth leader at my church, and then I was a case manager with high-risk youth and managed a family resource center and worked as a behavior management specialist for severely emotionally disturbed children. And my closest friends kept urging me to get my college degree, and I felt like what I really wanted to do was impact that one person who's in front of me right now, be able to have a conversation with them that actually might change their lives, that could even save their lives. And that was so important to me, to just be that person with their boots on the ground. I saw college as being that person who has their head in the clouds, right? And I didn't see the value in it, and the time and money that it takes to do that as well. So So in 2001, the world as I knew it started crashing down around me even more than it had before then. My mom had an aneurysm burst in her brain. And so through my childhood of having an abusive father and abusive brother, my mom was just like my lifeline and moving all the time. We didn't have, our extended family lives far away, I never knew them. And so my mom was everything. And she had severe brain damage. She had 8 brain surgeries and she was in a coma. And I spent 3 or 4 days a week either sleeping on the floor in her hospital room or sleeping out in the car in the parking lot because her brain trauma rehab was in San Francisco and I couldn't afford ongoing hotels all the time. And she was in the hospital for months and months. So 3 or 4 days a week I'd be with her. And then the other 3 or 4 days a week I was at home with my family and my 3 sons and working full-time at the teen center and working 10 or 12-hour days in order to make it up so I could go take care of my mom while she was kind of dealing with her coma stuff. So, but my saving grace during that time was I did work in the teen center, so my kids could come to my workplace after school and I still got to be with them. But then 9/11 happened that year, right? And it just really turned our whole world upside down. And the way that impacted me, my dad was managing 7 airports at that time, and now suddenly everything with air traffic control is very concerning. And so he's having to deal with that a lot and wasn't quite as able to do things with my mom. And so my need to be there for my mom jumped up a lot. And then I was also at a teen center where kids are just lost and they're, what's happening in our world? Is this gonna happen here too? And so taking care of those. And my own kids having, the emotional impact it had on them. And then my ex-husband his emotional abuse began to get more and more physical. And so I knew I had to get out. So in 2001, I found myself suddenly without my mom, as a single mom raising 3 kids, working full-time and trying to take care of my mom in her coma and also help my dad get through, like, how does he deal with 2001 and my mom and everything that was going on. So I just felt like I had the weight of the world on my shoulders during that time period. Then 3 years later, I was in a new town, in a new state, in a new career, a new home, a new husband, and was rebuilding my life. And my husband and I decided that we wanted to have a baby together. I had 3 older kids, but we really wanted to do that together. And we started trying immediately and conceived a little boy, and my older sons were super excited. They're gonna be big brothers, and they're naming all the things. We're gonna go to all of the baseball games, and we're gonna watch him, do this and that and everything. And we knew when I was pregnant, if it was a boy or girl, no matter what, it's gonna be named Jordan. And we had that all picked out, and my kids would draw pictures and write Jordan's name in them. And in 2005 was the second year that I found myself drowning in the grief of tragic life circumstances. My pregnancy was really difficult. I was diagnosed at 5 weeks with hyperemesis gravidarum, which is when your nausea and vomiting is so severe that you're losing weight, you're dehydrated, you need IV fluids just to survive. I was literally starving to death. And then when I was 20 weeks pregnant, I found out that my son had a condition called trisomy 18. And as my OBGYN put it, because probably nobody has heard of that condition, or very few have, what she told me when she told me that he had it was, this fetus is just gonna die anyway, and you just need to schedule your termination. So, and the topic of abortion is probably the most emotionally charged political topic out there. Most people who talk about abortion tell you that they have really strong beliefs one way or the other, but they usually agree that when a mother's life is in danger or the baby has an extreme medical condition, that they should have the right, or for some people even it seems like obligation, to terminate the pregnancy. But I feel like such an extreme medical choice should be a very private decision between parents and their doctor. But for the sake of this discussion and bearing my soul today, I feel like it should be public with my personal beliefs. So my life was in danger because of the hyperemesis. People die from that every year. And trisomy 18 carries a statistic that 80% of those babies are stillborn, and those born alive, 90% die before their first birthday. And I consider myself to be pro-choice. I don't believe that any woman who has to make that choice, it's ever easy for them. And we're pretty much asked, would you rather be hit in the face with a brick or a rock? And it's a horrific choice, but when given the choice to terminate or continue my pregnancy, I chose to continue. I wanted to give my son every chance for life. I wanted to look into his eyes and tell him that I love him. My doctor at the time did not support my choice to continue my pregnancy, and she refused to see me anymore if I wouldn't terminate, so I had to find a new doctor who was willing to continue seeing me throughout my pregnancy. During the next few months, I prayed exhaustively every day, 100 times every day for 3 things. I prayed that my son would beat the odds and I'd get to meet him alive. I prayed that when he died, I could go with him. And I prayed that my 3 sons would be okay without a mom. All day long, every day, that's all I prayed for. The day finally came when my son would be born by emergency C-section. And I had a moment alone with my sons, and I saw the fear in their eyes. And for the first time, I saw how much they needed their mom. And I prayed that I would stay and have lifetime with my sons. That was the only time I ever said, okay, I'm willing to live through this. My son Jordan was born alive on March 10th and lived for 32 hours and 7 minutes, the most beautiful 32 hours that any human has ever had. We celebrated each hour as a birthday. It was a beautiful, joyous time, and even his death was beautiful. We each took turns holding him and kissing him goodbye, and a room full of friends were singing, "We are standing on holy ground, and I know that there are angels all around." Still, his death was like a dagger to my heart. Right after he died, we bathed him and dressed him for his trip to the funeral home. My husband had to pry his body from my arms as my friends held me down. I had several severe medical complications from the C-section, and then 2 days after he died, my milk came in and my breasts felt like they were going to explode. I was physically, emotionally, and psychologically devastated. That same year, my doctor encouraged me to try again. He said that he had never heard of somebody having more than one baby with trisomy. He said that's like getting struck with lightning twice. It just doesn't happen. I can tell you that the second lightning strike is no less painful. Joshua Michael died in utero during my 2nd trimester and was diagnosed after an autopsy with trisomy 21. My doctor was certain that a 3rd strike was impossible. 3 months later, my 3rd strike happened on Thanksgiving Day, and the next year I had 2 more miscarriages. Eventually, I quit my job at CPS. Seeing abused children every day was just torture. Why did those parents get to keep their babies while mine were stolen away, and why didn't I have a mom there to support me? Those 2 years were dark. There's no way to sugarcoat or avoid telling you that I found myself very depressed. I was diagnosed with profound grief, depression, and PTSD. I couldn't even do basic life things like go to the grocery store. I spent most of my time in my room with the shades drawn, just sitting in the dark, staring at the empty crib. I would smell his hospital blankets, the ones that Jordan had been wrapped in, and my husband and I would jokingly call it huffing Jordan, but we both did that. And I would rock in the rocking chair that I had planned to rock him in and listen to the recording of his heartbeat. And I would sing all of the songs that I had planned to sing to my babies. So it was dark. I had a recurring dream that I was running a race. Robin told you I was a runner when I was younger, and I had this dream that I was running a race, and I came to a point where Jordan was on the sidelines, and I had to decide, am I going to keep running, or am I going to stop and stay with Jordan? And I had this dream every night, and I wake up in a cold sweat, and I would just say, no, I need to be with Jordan. I need to go be with Jordan. And it was just really difficult times. Then one day my husband said the words that would change my life completely. Everyone is going to see that Jordan changed your life, but it's up to you what that change is. So that night, I had the same recurring dream I've been having, only this time Jordan wasn't at the sidelines. He was at the finish line cheering me on. The next day, I signed up for my very first college class at the age of 39. And I wanted to get my degree and change the world. I wanted to make large systems changes that affected hundreds of people. I wanted to lead an organization that would impact society. I was working full-time, parenting 3 teenagers, going to school, taking as many as 27 units per semester. Looking back, it's sometimes hard to believe that I was able to do the things that I did with everything I had going on. somehow got through that. And 2 years after the death of my son, I finally began to live my dream. I finished my bachelor's degree in organizational leadership in 3 years with straight A's and went straight into my grad school program and had my master's in business administration 2 years later. Upon completion of my MBA, I was hired at Stand Up Placer as a program manager. Stand Up Placer is Placer County's Rape Crisis Center and Domestic Violence Victim Service Agency. We provide holistic services for survivors of crime. We have the county's only safe house and 40 units of long-term housing, therapy, support groups, legal services, on-scene responders, and much more. I hit the ground running and was quickly promoted from program manager to director of programs to associate director, chief operating officer, and eventually executive director and CEO. My footprint grew in my community as well. I served for several years on the Homeless Resource Council of the Sierras as vice president and as a member of the steering committee with Leadership Rockland. And I'm currently a commissioner with First 5 Placer, and I'm active in the FBI Citizens Academy. Within 2 years, as CEO of Stand Up Placer, I grew an agency which had been operating on a budget of $1.3 million for over 10 years to a budget of over $3.5 million. Our annual services to survivors grew from 37,000 in 2015 to 111,000 in 2018 in just 3 years. We made major program shifts as well. We began serving incarcerated individuals who were survivors of violence. We tripled our long-term housing assistance, increased the size and profitability of our thrift store, and began the agency's first ever prevention program. Stand Up Placer began to see an increase in victims of sex trafficking in 2015. We served 10 victims that year, and then we wrote to the state and asked to be designated as a human trafficking victim service agency. What that does is it affords them the right to have privileged communication with us, where they can tell us everything that's ever happened and know that that information is safe. And we've increased that program so much that in 2018 we served 229 victims of human trafficking. During that same year, we served thousands of victims of sexual assault and domestic violence. So the changes that we made that were closest to my heart are those which affect children. In the first 30 years of our agency, we averaged serving about 100 kids a year. Some of those are primary victims who were victims of assault, and some of them are secondary victims or child witnesses of domestic violence. Last year alone, we served almost 450 kids. I'm also very proud to say that we improved our safe house to be gender inclusive, and we now allow pets to accompany their survivors. My personal goal is to remove every possible barrier that victims may face in obtaining life-saving services that they need. In October 2018, the BBC did a special on Stand Up Placer, recognizing the importance of our safe house becoming pet-friendly. Only about 3% of the safe houses in the US and Canada are pet-friendly, and about 70% of perpetrators abuse pets as a form of their abuse, one of what they do to abuse their victims, and up to 50% of victims stay in an abusive environment longer because they're afraid of what will happen to their pet if they leave. So when the BBC reporter came out to do the story, we had a chance to talk at length, and I told him my story that I told you earlier. And the day after the interview was when I was told I was chosen to be included in the BBC's list of 100 women who inspire and influence the world. It's an incredible honor to be on the list with the first female leader of the United Nations, the first female president of the New York Stock Exchange, and the 2018 winner of the Nobel Prize in Chemistry. There are only 8 women in the United States who were given this international honor. And there are many ways to measure the growth of our agency. The greatest change we can measure is the change in the lives that we've touched and continue to impact each year. So I'm very proud to be standing in front of you today as a woman who has survived incredible losses, tragedy, and trauma, a woman who was ready to give up and climb into my son's grave to be with him, a woman whose life was defined by unimaginable grief. One day I made the decision to change the world. Into every life, a little rain must fall. My life had a hurricane. I'm sure that many people in this room have survived storms of your own. And I'm here today to tell you that you don't need to be defined by your storm. You can survive to be defined by your courage. Courage isn't lost when you're knocked down, battered, or bruised. Courage is found the moment you stand up again, dust yourself off, and live your dream.